All right, y'all, it's time. Phylyps Trak, basic channel. Here we go. Right away, we've got two things happening. One, I'm calling stern because it's this very stern sounding synth. Might be a sample, but whatever it is, it's a 2-bar loop. And it's going dun 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 dun. Again, it's just very stern sounding. And then you have these things I called twiggling toms. That's the word we're going with, twiggling. And basically, these are a bunch of toms that are twiggling around. They feel like they're vibrating around. Listen for that. If you have headphones on, you might notice that the toms are panning a little bit. But yeah, so you have these two things playing, and they're both doing a 2-bar loop. So we're going to have that happen for a while. It's going to keep happening. Eventually, this 16th note hat's going to happen. And I guess just before we get to the 16th note hat, I want you to note that this is, at least in my opinion, it really depends, but this is kind of a lot in the sense that we're listening to these two loops playing for quite a long time. But I think that's important because what we're going to discover with this track is so much about its arrangement, is about pace, and is about being able to allow yourself the space to explore sounds, because it gets very like dub techno-y, and I think it's important with music like this that's like letting individual elements play their part and just like fly around, which we'll get to later, so don't worry if you're confused. But by giving yourself a pace that is a good amount of time, that allows you to the listener to have more patience and to like stick with you as you do all these dubby things. So yeah, we're about 33 seconds in, and we're going to start to notice a little like 16th note hat thing kind of creep into the picture. Its volume is going up. So here's a little red line. This represents volume. So listen again for that hat coming in. Awesome. And then that kick comes, and that kick is roaring. So this track came out in 1993. So it was probably, and again, if you know better, comment and let me know, but a lot of this was probably played live, or at least in the sense of they maybe had all these tracks. They may have had them all arranged with loops in a system, and then they could just like select scenes from a mixing board so that they could maybe switch back and forth. I'm just guessing. Again, comment below. But even if that is not totally right, it's important to note that this part of what makes this track so cool is there's so much humanity in it. And you get the humanity through the way that this hat is just brought up for only 4 bars, and then a kick comes in after 4 bars of change. And I say that that's human-like because a lot of techno songs will follow strict structures where you have 8 bars, 16 bars, 8 bars, 16 bars, whatever. But what's cool about this track is that you can tell that someone's there like pushing up the volume of this, adding the kick in when they feel like it. And you're going to notice some things at some points, like the structure is going to change really rapidly. And basically just keep an eye out for this. This is a very human track, so it makes sense that we're raising in this volume this way. And you're going to notice there's just a lot of subtlety that is arising from humanity. So let's keep listening. We have this thunderous kick coming in. It sounds like the volume's going down in that a little bit in the hats. Okay, I love this right here. So this is part of that humanity too. So if you've watched any of my other videos, usually things are broken up really beautifully into these little sections. And I guess it's still sort of is here, but it just feels so human, this beat. So basically, we're at the end of a 16 bar situation where we've had these 16 note hats, but even those hats seem to be changing a little bit in volume. And I like this here because I think we get a small taste, just a little bit, see that little bit of the offbeat. You can just kind of hear that the drums pick up a little bit, and it sounds like we might get a clap / snare or whatever happening every once in a while too. So that kind of makes sense actually, that it occurs towards the end of an 8-bar interval, because like a lot of people will put in like a drum thing or a variation at the end of an 8-bar interval to get you excited for the next 8 bars. But the way that they do theirs is just super cool, because you just get that human feel. You feel this thing pick up and get moving. So let's listen for that and keep going. So it does seem like here, I think it's still happening, but like the volume may have even dropped a little bit here too, because it gets all exciting here, and you do still hear it as well here, but it's just a little different. And if I'm being totally honest, I actually may have heard it a little bit in here too, but I don't know if it's important to go back at this point, because the main ideas that we're talking about is gonna be how they use so much humanity in this track to keep it interesting as it goes. So yeah, so let's keep listening. I don't think that should have been there. Okay, cool. So check this out. So remember here when we started to bring in the offbeat, and I said that makes sense because at the end of an 8-bar cycle. Well, now we have another. Well, now we just had another 8-bar cycle, and that was cool. But now we're going into another 8-bar cycle, and so now they're going to add a new element, which is going to be, I called it minor chord. I call it minor chord because it sounds like just some like stark minor chord, and it's hitting somewhat rhythmically here. Let's call it tree because there's another minor chord coming up. I call it tree because to me it has this sound of like some ancient tree. I hate to sound, I hope that's not like, I don't mean that in a super like hippie way. Maybe I do. Just like some wise old tree in the forest, I feel like would sound like this if it was upset. But okay, it's kind of, this is going do do do, and then this kind of responds do do a little bit. Just see if you can hear how this kind of responds to the stern. Because this goes doom doom doom, and then this pops in and goes boom. And that's just really cool. Again, that's so like it just fills in the space really well from a sonic perspective, and I think it does it again here. Yeah, it does. So this is going like boom boom boom, but it's doing it after this has kind of had its say. So they're playing off each other well, and this is part of why the loop's so good. But yeah, let's keep going. So this is cool. So now we're dropping the drums out again, which just gives us a little breath. But yeah, just look, it's weird how the kick happens for the first bar when normally it would have dropped out here, because we've been working with this sort of 2-bar loop thing happening. And so the fact that the kick goes on when we just, like, basically the kick is staying for 5 bars where normally it would be gone already here. So this is another human part. I think that may have been a bit confusing. So basically, like, look at this. See how these shapes are all the same? We've got a nice loop here, and it's a 4-bar loop. And so, yeah, this is just another of the human feel that we're getting. We're not getting these strict 8 bars with all the drums, then 8 bars without the drums, then 8 bars with the chords and 8 bars without the chords. Instead, they're giving us 4 bars with the kick, then 1 bar with the kick, and then they're dropping everything. But see, it's just like weird timing, and that's cool. And to me, that's part of why this track feels so alive, because you can again feel the humanity. I just had to let that play out a bit. It's awesome. It's just awesome. I mean, what amazing. So, yeah, basically they just gave us a little break so we can hear these 3 main elements playing. And if you watched one of the first tutorials we put out, or first breakdowns, was of the field. And in the field track, basically the guy, the field, he's really great. He makes these beautiful melodic pieces. But what he does is what's happening here, which is he'll get like 3 loops. His is more like openly melodic, but he'll get 3 loops that work really well together, and then he'll milk them. Like, they just sound so nice together that you can hear it for a long period of time. And so I love it how right here, by dropping out the drums, it basically says, hey, this is like the main dish. Like, this is all the goodies right here. And then they just bring in the drums. Remember, there is offbeat here, but that was tiny offbeat. But now we're getting the full-on offbeat, and it's just fire. It's just fire. And yeah, so let's just keep listening. But they're just gonna give us that loop for a while. Okay, so finally something new's happening. This is called minor chord. So this is why I had to rename the other minor chord. But basically, what's happening here is pretty neat. I decided to change it all. But what's happening here with the minor chord is pretty neat. It's just playing a minor chord in rhythmic fashion. And I like it because if you notice, the stern thing kind of drops off. These are approximations. So again, part of the glory of this track is how it's very sneaky. Like, I say sneaky because it seems super repetitive, but at the same time it is changing. But you have to like just really pay attention if you really want to notice it explicitly. If you're just enjoying the track, you're just enjoying a track, and that's awesome. Yeah, so it seems like this stern thing slowly drops out, and this minor chord thing kind of replaces it in a way. And I'm just going to let you know, it's sometimes hard to re-pick everything out when I just start it over again, because it's molded so well together. But yeah, that's just a thing. So remember, this stern thing's going to slowly drop out. So that's super cool, because now that this minor chord's coming in, it's really just replacing whatever you lost from there. And now it's giving us just a new thing to listen to, so that's great. So I want to know, it does sound like, I think here we're getting some little echoes in these chords too that maybe weren't happening earlier. Let's just listen for that real quick. Yeah, it does seem different. It's a bit subtle. I'll try it one more time. I think there's some echoes happening here versus here. It's still happening there, but there is more. You can keep flipping back and forth if you want, but that's very important. That might not seem that important, but this whole concept is super important. The concept of how this one's different than that one, especially through its use of delay, because as this track goes on, they're gonna start milking these samples by delaying them and stuff, and that's really cool. But basically, they're gonna do stuff like that so much that that's basically how this track works in one respect. And so just pay it. We're gonna keep talking about that, but I want to zoom out and let's look at the whole thing real quick. So these are all tracks, right? Kick, offbeat, clap, 16th hat. You know, these are different like melodic, harmonic, whatever things. Now, as I said, it's gonna be changing. They're gonna be using a lot of these human feels by making human modifications. But notice how when you look at the beginning of the track, like here you have purple, blue, green, orange, green, green. Now that combination does happen again, but look how many parts of the track have something that's not that. By that I mean, you'll notice that like there's yellow here, but there's not yellow there. There's yellow here and there's blue there, but when there's yellow here, there's not blue there. But when there's orange here, you have green here, but when you have orange here, you don't have green there. And so what I'm saying is, even though this might not look like many tracks, they're putting each of them in different combinations with the other ones, which is just making this stay interesting for so long. So yeah, we'll keep talking about that, but let's get back into it. So I think we're around here. Yeah. Let's just I made these blue because I think we're starting to hear them come in again. I probably could have just done this as well. But yeah, it sounds like they're starting to come in again. Actually, it doesn't really sound like they're still there. Sorry, this is one of those tracks I keep listening. I've had to double check this a lot. But yeah, so I don't think they're there. But it does seem like we're getting some modification of the minor chord. And that's just important because, again, it's all about milking these samples / synths to keep this thing interesting. Okay, cool. So now we're getting the scraggly sample. This is that weird melody that's all scraggly sounding. So, oh, it's so cool. And by the way, we started delaying a lot up here too. The tree synth started, I should say tree. Just check it out. It's starting to delay here. And actually, before we even got to the scraggly sample, it was starting to, the gain was starting to drop and go up. Now, I could edit this heavy, but because maybe I should have mentioned this before I mentioned scraggly sample, but at the same time, this track, it's so subtle. You really have to listen to identify what's going on here, and that's part of why it's so cool. Like, frankly, as we were just listening back, I wasn't. It was hard for me to pay attention to these changes in volume because it's all just so incredibly seamless. So listen for that again, and listen how this part starts to delay. And while that starts delaying, this scraggly sample enters, and it's just like, that's what I mean. It's so smooth. It's not this crazy fast transition or something. It's just it's just molding into itself. It's almost like mixing paint. I don't know if that's a good way to describe it, but it's really cool. And look how these, even just the way, yeah. So we hear the scraggly sample coming in, and hopefully you can appreciate just how crazy that was. And we're gonna just keep going. We'll see what else happens. So that's another cool thing. I'm gonna make this tree again. Another cool thing to note is look how the tree part, it used to be like this more complicated looking thing, but at this point now they're just like delaying little parts of it, and it's super cool because now these things are just floating over the whole beat. And it used to be playing this more like openly obvious lead roll, and now it's just like getting all trippy and dubby and just floating around. I just like that because that's just very smart. That's like having a corn cob, and like once you eat all the corn, like using the cob to make broth or something. They're taking what they had from earlier, the tree thing, and they're turning it into something else just by delaying it. And I like that because a lot of times when people produce, they keep adding stuff, they overcrowd everything, and it's often annoying when people do that. And I think it's really cool when people can have something tight, like this whole situation here, this whole loop here, and in order to keep it interesting, they'll take one of those elements and start modifying that element. And I feel like that's what we got happening here, and that's just really cool. So let's just keep listening and see what we find. Super cool. So see, that was let's look at the macro again. That was right around here. It's cool to drop the offbeat off like that, how it drops off before. But to me, it's very abrupt. But again, it just feels very human in its abruptness somehow. yeah, like it's not this perfect things are here, things are there, some things aren't here, some things aren't there transition. Like this thing, the kick drop or the offbeat drops out right here. It's just cool. And yeah, so now they're gonna strip it down a little bit. But check this out. I don't see, we've never had twiggly toms and scraggly sample together. So like see over here, you don't have the green and the yellow down here. So this is a whole new sensation. You could say, oh, well, you had it over here, but that's the thing. You also had minor chord happening over here, but now you don't have minor chord happening. You're hearing this in a new way, so it's new sounding. And this also is just a cool down period for the track. They just were going ham, so yeah. So it makes sense they dropped out the offbeat. Okay, a bunch of stuff just happened. Well, not that much, but so you'll see they brought the minor chord back in. They started dancing it around a bit, which is cool. But this part is crazy. And I say that because, look, we just had how many bars? We just had about, we were gonna have an 8-bar loop, because remember, normally like an 8-bar loop is what you'd expect. That's what's normal. But here, they cut it off short and just go into this section. And again, remember I kept talking about humanity at the beginning? I think this is the most blatant example of it. Like, to me, this just feels so much like a spontaneous of the moment thing. But I think because it like sort of breaks the rule of just make it perfect 8 bars, and something about it to me is very interesting. So let's listen to that again. Like, it just throws this part back in your face. Like, we just started getting a little more like psychedelic, a little more falling around. Like, these melodies are flying everywhere. But now it instantly like brings you back to that tough thing at the beginning. And at this point, like, yeah, all they had to do was add the offbeat, because this loop's fire. And like I said, at least for me, this is one of my favorite 909 offbeats ever. I think it's in the mix, it's in the pocket, it's aggressive, it's just great. So it's so great that all they have to do is add it, and then we'll keep listening for a while. But they're eventually going to bring a variation of scraggly sample back in. So this is cool. We're building back up again, but we're building back up in a way that's different than the last way we built up. And if you watched the video of DJ Rolando Jaguar, you'll note that they did a similar process. They built something up, they broke it down, they built it back up in a new way. So we're building back up, but in a new way. And if you're wondering, how's it a new way? It's because, look, scraggly sample's all weird now. We've never had this experience before. But yeah, it's gonna keep doing that for a long time. So we'll keep listening. So cool. So they decided, all right, that was pretty intense. So they're cooling off again here, just by dropping off offbeat and clap. Cool again though how they dropped them off right before a new cycle starting. And yeah, our cycle got off because remember when they had that rule they broke, that threw us off the grid. So, well, we're still on the grid, but I like 4 bars, 2 bar, 8 bar cycles to start on a whole number, like a 253 for example, not 252.3, but whatever. That's basically, I'm just letting you know in case you're wondering why it's starting here. That's why it's starting here. The foundational loop of the track is what I mean. Cool, so now we're cooling off even more. The tree sample has now turned back into the delayed thing that we had from earlier. Look, minor chords coming back in. Amazing. So I say amazing because that offbeat and clap is back. Now again, how cool is this? It just feels so human how it returns because it just doesn't feel like it's perfectly on the grid. You get a bigger sensation of things coming in and out at spontaneous points, and that's just amazing. And that's how I feel like with this offbeat and clap. I feel like it just like comes at you and you're like, oh shit. So at this point we're just riding the groove. And another thing has happened, the minor chord, it seems to be ducking and then going back up in volume periodically. And I think this is important because again, it's a new thing. It used to just be playing like not at a totally consistent volume, but each hit was closer to the previous hit than is the case here, because here the volume's moving more dramatically, so that kind of makes it's a new thing as well. But yeah, pretty cool stuff. Let's keep going. So at this point you can tell these minor chords are sometimes popping in again. The scraggly sample is getting more love. And frankly, it's just going to do this. It's going to fade out. And yeah, this has been a long video and we don't need to talk about that stuff because we've already kind of gotten over some of the main things I would look at with these tracks. Of course, please comment below if you have a differing opinion because I'm sure there's a lot on a track like this, but my takeaways on a track like this is frankly a similar takeaway I have with a lot of tracks, whereas if you make a loop really, really good and you're able to create variation within the things you made and you just like keep it to like lesser elements, then that's just a cool thing. And I think this track does a good job exhibiting that. And Yeah, and I also think it's cool to see how, basically, to feel the humanity in it. Hopefully y'all understand that a little bit by seeing how they'll add things at times that don't always seem where you would expect them. And I just think that's really cool. So yeah, thank y'all for watching the video. One last conclusion. So it's sort of just like rose itself up, cooled down, rose itself up again, then cooled down. So that's more or less the structure in a very basic way. Yeah, subscribe if you haven't yet. Like this. Please tell a friend. I'd really appreciate it. I have Instagram. It's Alex Wilcox. We also have Response Instagram, which is response.response. So please check those out. And yeah, have a great evening or day or whatever, wherever you are.